She fell to her knees in the snow, too weak to stand, too broken to care anymore. The iron gates of Willow Creek Ranch blurred through her frozen tears. 8 months of begging. 8 months of doors slamming in her face. This was her last chance, and she was about to be turned away again. But then a man's voice cut through the bitter wind. Not with cruelty, with something that sounded almost like desperation. Wait! That single word would change everything for her, for him, and for 2 little girls who'd forgotten how to smile. Stay until the end to witness how one desperate moment became something extraordinary. Subscribe now and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The snow bit through Eleanor Sutton's thin dress like 1,000 tiny knives. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, hadn't been able to feel them for the last 2 miles. But she kept walking because stopping meant dying, and dying meant giving up. She wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The iron gates of Willow Creek Ranch rose before her like the entrance to another world. A world she didn't belong to. A world that would probably spit her out like all the others had. But she had nowhere else to go. State your business. The voice came from a man standing just inside the gates. Young, maybe 30, with a face that looked like it had never known a day of hunger. He wore clean clothes. Pressed clothes. The kind of clothes Eleanor had almost forgotten existed. She opened her mouth to speak, but her throat was so dry, so frozen, that nothing came out except a rasp. I said, state your business. The man's eyes traveled over her torn dress, her mud-caked boots, the shawl that was more holes than fabric. His lip curled. We don't give handouts here. Move along. Please. The words scraped out of her like broken glass. I'm looking for work. Any work. I can cook. I can clean. I can... You can barely stand. The man laughed, and the sound was ugly. Look at yourself. You're nothing but rags and bones. What could someone like you possibly offer Willow Creek Ranch? Someone like you. Eleanor had heard those words before. In Kansas, when the banker took her home. In Missouri, when the boarding house owner discovered she couldn't pay. In every town, every doorway, every face that looked at her and saw only what she'd lost. I'm a hard worker, she tried again. I don't need much. Just food and a place to... I said move along. The man stepped forward, and Eleanor stumbled backward, her frozen legs nearly giving out. Mr. Weston runs a respectable operation here. We don't need beggars bringing disease and trouble to our door. Disease, trouble, beggar. Is that what she'd become? Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart that had broken long ago in a small cabin in Kansas holding her son's lifeless body. This was something else. Something like the last thread of hope she'd been clinging to. I understand, she whispered. I'm sorry to have troubled you. She turned to go. Back into the snow. Back into the cold. Back into the nothing that had become her life. That's enough, Garrett. The new voice stopped her mid-step. Deep. Commanding. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. Eleanor turned slowly, her frozen body protesting every movement. A man had emerged from somewhere beyond the gates. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dark hair with threads of silver at the temples. He moved like someone who owned the ground beneath his feet, which she realized he probably did. This had to be Caleb Weston, the widower everyone in Silver Falls whispered about. Mr. Weston. Garrett's sneer disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. I was just sending this woman away. She came begging for work, but clearly she's not. I heard what you said. Weston's voice was quiet, but something in it made Garrett take a step back. I heard every word. He walked past Garrett without another glance and stopped a few feet from Eleanor. Up close, she could see his eyes were gray. Not soft gray like morning fog. Hard gray like winter stone. Like a man who'd stopped feeling a long time ago. Those eyes swept over her now, taking in every detail of her ruined appearance. Eleanor lifted her chin, refusing to cower, even though her legs were shaking so badly she wasn't sure how much longer she could stand. "You want work?" he asked. "Not unkind, not kind either, just flat, empty." "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question surprised her. "Because I need to eat, sir. And I need shelter. Winter's coming on hard, and I've got nowhere to—" "I know why you need work." He cut her off, impatient. "I'm asking why you came here. Willow Creek is 8 miles from town. In this weather. On foot by the look of you. Why not try somewhere closer?" Eleanor swallowed hard. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, but she'd learned that lies were heavier. "I tried everywhere closer, sir. They all turned me away." "Why?" "Because I have no references, no family. Nothing to prove I'm not—" She stopped, unable to finish. Not what I look like." Her voice cracked. "A beggar, a vagrant, someone who'll steal the silver and disappear in the night." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Recognition, maybe, or something darker. "And are you," he asked quietly, "someone who'll steal and disappear?" "No, sir." Eleanor met his gaze directly, drawing on every last ounce of strength she had left. "I'm someone who lost everything she loved and has been trying to survive ever since. That's not the same thing." Silence stretched between them. The wind howled. Snow swirled around Eleanor's ankles, seeping through the holes in her boots. She was shaking so hard now that she had to lock her knees to stay upright. Finally, Caleb Weston spoke again. "What's your name?" "Eleanor Sutton. Most folks call me Ellie." "Where are you from, Mrs. Sutton?" "Mrs." The word stabbed at her chest. "Kansas originally. Before that, Pennsylvania." "And your husband?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "Dead, sir. 7 months now." "How?" The question was brutal in its directness, but Eleanor had learned that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only currency she had left. "He took his own life," she said quietly. "After our son died. The grief, it ate him alive. And I couldn't stop it." She watched Weston's face for the reaction she always got. The pity, the disgust, the suspicion that somehow she was to blame. But his expression didn't change. If anything, his eyes seemed to darken with something that looked almost like understanding. "You have experience with children?" he asked. The shift in topic threw her. Yes, sir. I raised my son until he was 2, and before I married I helped my mother with the neighbor children when their mama was sick." "My daughters." Weston's voice roughened on the word. "They lost their mother 7 years ago. Lucy's 10 now, Hannah's 7. They've had governesses, housekeepers, more women than I can count trying to fill the hole their mother left. None of them lasted more than a few months." Eleanor waited, sensing there was more. "Lucy doesn't trust anyone anymore." His jaw tightened. "And Hannah? Hannah barely remembers what it's like to have someone hold her. They need—" He stopped abruptly, as if he'd said too much. "They need a mother," Eleanor finished softly. Weston's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and suspicious. "I'm not looking for a mother. I'm looking for someone who can care for them. Feed them. Make sure they do their lessons. Keep them safe. That's what mothers do, sir. Their mother is dead." The words came out harsh, almost angry, but Eleanor heard what was underneath them. Grief, raw and unhealed even after 7 years. She knew that kind of grief, knew how it could hollow you out until you were nothing but a walking shell. "I know about losing children," she said quietly. "I know what it does to a family. And I know those girls aren't looking for someone to replace what they lost. They're looking for someone who'll stay, someone who won't leave when things get hard." "And you think you're that person?" Weston's tone was skeptical. "A woman who showed up at my gates looking like she's 1 step from death." "I think I'm someone who has nothing left to lose," Eleanor replied. "Which means I have nothing to run back to. If you give me a chance, Mr. Weston, I'll give your daughters everything I have. And if that's not enough, then at least I'll have tried. Weston stared at her for a long moment. Behind him, Garrett shifted uncomfortably, clearly unhappy with the direction of this conversation. Mr. Weston, he interjected, I really don't think— I didn't ask what you think, Garrett. Weston didn't even turn around. His eyes stayed fixed on Eleanor's face, searching for something. She didn't know if he found it. Finally, he spoke. No pay, not at first. You'll get room and board, nothing more. You'll work in the house, help with the girls, do whatever Mrs. Holloway tells you. If you prove yourself trustworthy, we'll discuss wages. If you don't— He let the silence finish the sentence. Eleanor's heart stuttered. You're giving me a chance. I'm giving you a trial, he corrected. There's a difference. I understand. One more thing. Weston took a step closer, and Eleanor had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. My daughters have been hurt enough. If you're going to leave, leave now. Walk away before they ever see your face. Because if you stay, if you let them start to care about you, and then you disappear— His voice dropped to something almost dangerous. I won't forgive that. Do you understand me? Eleanor thought of her son's grave, unmarked and alone on a Kansas prairie. She thought of her husband's body hanging in the barn, where she'd found him on that terrible morning. She thought of every person who'd promised to help her and then turned away. I understand, she said, and I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in Weston's expression. Not softening, he didn't seem capable of that, but maybe, just maybe, a crack in the wall. Garrett opened the gate. But Mr. Weston— Now! Garrett's face twisted with resentment, but he obeyed. The iron gate swung open with a screech that sounded almost like a warning. Eleanor stepped through on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. The snow crunched under her ruined boots. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but she was inside. She was inside. Mrs. Holloway will show you to your quarters, Weston said, already turning toward the house. Get cleaned up. Warm food's in the kitchen. You'll meet the girls after supper. Mr. Weston. He paused but didn't turn around. Thank you, Eleanor said. I know I don't look like much right now, but I swear to you I'll earn my place here. We'll see, he said. And then he was walking away, his boots leaving deep prints in the fresh snow. Eleanor stood alone in the yard, surrounded by buildings she didn't know, facing a future she couldn't predict. Her body was frozen, exhausted, pushed beyond every limit she'd thought she had. But for the first time in 8 months, she felt something other than despair. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found somewhere to belong. The inside of the main house was warm. That was the first thing Eleanor registered. Warm in a way she'd almost forgotten existed, not just the absence of cold, but actual blessed heat radiating from a massive stone fireplace. The second thing she registered was the woman standing in the hallway, arms crossed, expression somewhere between suspicion and curiosity. So you're the one. The woman was perhaps 60, with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and weren't impressed by any of it. She wore a spotless apron over a dark dress, and she held herself with the authority of someone who ran things. Ma'am, Eleanor's voice came out hoarse. Mr. Weston said— I know what Mr. Weston said. I was watching from the window. The woman Mrs. Holloway, Eleanor assumed, looked her up and down with the same assessing gaze Weston had used. You look like death warmed over. I feel like it too, ma'am. Something that might have been approval flickered across Mrs. Holloway's face. At least you're honest. Come on then. Bath first, then food. Can't have you meeting the girls looking like you crawled out of a snowbank. She turned and walked briskly down the hallway, clearly expecting Eleanor to follow. Eleanor did her frozen legs, protesting every step. The house was bigger than she'd expected. Clean floors, polished wood, photographs in silver frames lining the walls. In many of them, Eleanor caught glimpses of a woman pretty dark-haired laughing. The late Mrs. Weston, she realized. The ghost that haunted this place. That's Catherine, Mrs. Holloway said, noticing Eleanor's gaze. Died 7 years ago, bringing Hannah into the world. Complications, they said. She was laughing at breakfast gone by midnight. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for me. Be sorry for those girls who had to grow up without their mama. Be sorry for Mr. Weston, who's been walking around like a dead man ever since. Mrs. Holloway's voice softened slightly. This house needs life in it again. Question is whether you're the one to bring it. They climbed a narrow staircase and emerged in a plain hallway. Mrs. Holloway stopped at a door near the end. This is your room, small but clean. Bed's comfortable enough. There's a washstand and a tub being filled as we speak. She fixed Eleanor with a sharp look. Hot water's a luxury around here. Don't waste it. I won't, ma'am. Mrs. Holloway nodded curtly. I'll bring clothes. You look about Catherine's size. She was slight like you. The dresses have been sitting in trunks for 7 years. Time someone got use out of them. I couldn't. You can and you will. Catherine would have wanted it. She was generous that way. Mrs. Holloway paused at the door. Supper's in an hour. Kitchen's at the back of the house. Don't be late. Those girls have enough people disappoint them. She left without waiting for a response. Eleanor stood alone in the small room, her whole body shaking now that she'd finally stopped moving. The bed was narrow but clean, covered with a patchwork quilt that looked handmade. A window overlooked the back pastures, though all she could see now was swirling snow. A small cross hung on the wall above the washstand. She sank onto the edge of the bed and let herself feel for just a moment the enormity of what had just happened. She'd been given a chance. After 8 months of doors slamming in her face, of people looking at her like she was garbage, of sleeping in abandoned barns and begging for scraps, someone had finally said yes. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. No time for crying. She had to prove she deserved this. Had to show them she was more than the rags she'd arrived in. A knock at the door announced 2 young maids carrying buckets of steaming water. They filled the copper tub in the corner, sneaking curious glances at Eleanor, but not speaking. After they left, Eleanor stripped off her ruined clothes and lowered herself into the water. The heat was almost painful against her frozen skin. She had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. But as the warmth seeped into her bones, something else seeped out, some of the fear, some of the desperation, some of the crushing weight she'd been carrying for so long. She scrubbed herself clean, watching weeks of dirt and despair swirl down the drain. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a rough towel, she felt almost human again. The clothes Mrs. Holloway had left were simple but well made. A dark blue dress with a high collar, clean undergarments, stockings without holes, shoes that were only slightly too big. Eleanor dressed slowly, running her hands over the soft cotton. When had she last worn something that wasn't falling apart? She couldn't remember. She braided her wet hair and pinned it up, then studied herself in the small mirror above the washstand. The woman looking back was thin, too thin, with shadows under her eyes and a gauntness to her cheeks that spoke of too many missed meals. But she was clean. She was warm. And she was here. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. You have to do this. The kitchen was warm and busy when Eleanor found it. Mrs. Holloway stood at a massive iron stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. A young girl, maybe 16, was kneading bread at a wooden table. Sit, Mrs. Holloway ordered without turning around. Eat. A plate appeared before Eleanor almost immediately, stew thick with vegetables and meat, fresh bread with butter, and a cup of hot tea. She wanted to devour it all in one breath, but forced herself to eat slowly, knowing her shrunken stomach couldn't handle too much too fast. When's the last time you had a real meal? Mrs. Holloway asked, setting down her spoon and turning to face Eleanor. 4 days ago, ma'am. A bakery in Silver Falls gave me stale bread for sweeping their floor. Mrs. Holloway's expression flickered. And before that? I don't remember. Silence hung between them. Then Mrs. Holloway nodded once sharply. You'll eat 3 meals a day here. Regular meals. I won't have you fainting on the job. She paused. The girls have their supper in the nursery. Mr. Weston eats in his study most nights. You'll take your meals in here with the staff. Yes, ma'am. And stop calling me ma'am. Mrs. Holloway will do. Yes, Mrs. Holloway. The older woman studied her for a long moment. You've got grit, I'll give you that. Walking 8 miles in this weather, half frozen, still standing up straight, when Garrett tried to send you away. She shook her head. Most people would have given up long before reaching our gates. Giving up wasn't an option. Why not? Eleanor set down her spoon, the question digging into old wounds. Because I've lost everything else, Mrs. Holloway. My son, my husband, my home, my dignity. If I give up now, then all that loss was for nothing. And I can't accept that. I won't. Mrs. Holloway was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Catherine. Mrs. Weston. She was like that too. Stubborn as a mule when she set her mind to something. Wouldn't let anything or anyone tell her what she couldn't do. A sad smile crossed her face. Those girls have her stubbornness, especially Lucy. Heaven help whoever tries to tell that child no. Tell me about them, Eleanor said. The girls. What should I know? Mrs. Holloway sighed and sat down heavily across from Eleanor. Lucy's the older one, 10 years old going on 40. She was 3 when Catherine died, old enough to remember her, old enough to understand what she lost. She's built walls around herself so high you can barely see the child inside. She'll test you, Mrs. Sutton, push you away, say cruel things to see if you'll leave like all the others. And if I don't leave, then maybe she'll let you in, but it won't be easy. Eleanor nodded. She understood walls. She'd built plenty of her own. What about Hannah? Hannah's different. She was born the night Catherine died, never knew her mother at all. She's hungry for affection in a way that breaks your heart. She'll attach to anyone who shows her kindness, which means she gets hurt over and over when they leave. Mrs. Holloway's voice roughened. That child needs someone to stay, someone who won't disappear after a few weeks when things get hard. I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor said quietly. That's what they all say. I know. Eleanor met the older woman's eyes steadily. But I mean it. Mrs. Holloway held her gaze for a long moment. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her because she nodded and stood up. Finish your supper. Then I'll take you to meet them. She paused at the door. And Mrs. Sutton, don't make promises you can't keep. Those girls have had enough broken promises to last a lifetime. The nursery was on the second floor in the family wing of the house. Eleanor could hear voices as they approached, a woman's patient tone and a child's sharp retort. Mrs. Holloway knocked once, then opened the door. 2 girls sat at a table by the window. The older one, Lucy, had dark hair and gray eyes, startlingly like her father's. She looked up with an expression that was part suspicion, part challenge, all defiance. The younger one, Hannah, was fair-haired and delicate, with huge blue eyes that reminded Eleanor painfully of her own son. She clutched a porcelain doll to her chest and watched Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and hope. A tired-looking woman in her 20s stood nearby, clearly the current governess. She looked at Eleanor with undisguised relief. Girls, Mrs. Holloway said, this is Mrs. Sutton. She'll be helping take care of you from now on. Lucy's eyes narrowed. We don't need anyone else taking care of us. Lucy, the governess started. It's true. Lucy's voice was sharp, old beyond her years. The last one said she'd stay forever. She left after 3 weeks. The one before that lasted 12 days. She looked at Eleanor with cold assessment. How long will you last? Eleanor didn't flinch. Instead, she crossed the room slowly and knelt down, bringing herself to Lucy's eye level. You're right, she said quietly. People leave. I know that better than most. I've had a lot of people leave me too. Lucy blinked clearly, not expecting agreement. So I'm not going to promise you I'll stay forever, Eleanor continued. Because you're too smart to believe that. What I will promise is this. Every day I'm here, I'll show up. Every day I'll do my best. And if I do have to leave someday, It won't be because you weren't worth staying for." Silence filled the room. Lucy stared at her, those gray eyes, searching for something, lies, maybe, or weakness. "You're different from the others," she finally said. "They always promised they'd stay." "I know. I don't trust you. I wouldn't expect you to. Not yet." Another long pause. Then Lucy said, "Fine, but don't expect me to call you mother or anything stupid like that. I wouldn't dream of it." Eleanor kept her voice gentle. "You already had a mother. No one can replace her." Something cracked in Lucy's expression, just for a moment, a flash of the wounded child beneath the armor. Then she rebuilt her walls and turned back to her book, dismissing Eleanor entirely. But Eleanor had seen it, and that was enough for now. She turned to Hannah, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Hello, Hannah." "Hello." The little girl's voice was barely a whisper. "You're pretty." Eleanor smiled, her heart aching. "Thank you. That's a beautiful doll you have there." Hannah clutched the doll tighter. "Her name is Emma. She was Mama's when Mama was little." "She's lucky to have you taking care of her." Hannah considered this. Then very slowly, she climbed down from her chair and crossed to where Eleanor knelt. She stopped a foot away, studying her with that intense, hopeful gaze. "Can you read?" "Yes, I can." "Will you read to me? Miss Davis says her throat hurts." It was a test, Eleanor realized. A small offering of trust, fragile as spun glass. "I would be honored," she said softly. Hannah's face lit up. She grabbed Eleanor's hand, her small fingers warm and trusting, and pulled her toward a shelf of books in the corner. "This one," she said, selecting a worn volume of fairy tales. It was Mama's favorite. Eleanor let herself be led to the rocking chair by the window. Hannah climbed into her lap without hesitation, curling against her chest, like she'd always belonged there. The weight of the small body hit Eleanor like a physical blow. So similar to holding Samuel. So achingly familiar, and yet completely different. She forced herself to breathe through the pain, to focus on this child, who was alive, who was here, who needed her. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall, "in a land far, far away." As she read, she felt Lucy watching from across the room. Not with hostility anymore. With something more complicated, wariness, mixed with wonder, suspicion, mixed with longing. These girls were so starved for love. So desperate for someone to stay. Eleanor tightened her arms around Hannah and kept reading, making a silent vow to whoever might be listening. She would stay. No matter what it took, no matter what challenges came, she would stay. She'd lost one child. She wouldn't fail these two. That night, lying in her narrow bed with a full stomach and warm blankets, Eleanor allowed herself to feel the weight of this day. This morning, she'd been ready to die. Ready to lie down in the snow and let the cold take her. Now she had a roof over her head, food in her belly, two little girls who might let her into their hearts, and a man with gray eyes and walls as high as her own, watching her from a distance, waiting to see if she'd prove him right or wrong for taking a chance on her. She thought about Lucy's defiance and Hannah's desperate hope. She thought about Mrs. Holloway's warning and Caleb Weston's ultimatum. If you let them start to care about you and then you disappear, I won't forgive that. She wouldn't disappear. She wouldn't run. For the first time in 8 months, Eleanor Sutton had something to fight for. And she intended to fight with everything she had left. The days at Willow Creek Ranch fell into a rhythm that Eleanor clung to like a lifeline. She woke before dawn, helped Mrs. Holloway prepare breakfast, spent mornings with the girls on their lessons, assisted with household tasks in the afternoon, and read stories by the fire until bedtime. It was exhausting work, but it was good work. Honest work. The kind of work that left her too tired to dream about Kansas. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Lucy remained guarded, watching Eleanor with those sharp gray eyes, waiting for her to slip up to prove she was just like all the others. but she'd stopped making cruel comments about how long Eleanor would last. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. Hannah, on the other hand, had attached herself to Eleanor like a shadow. She followed her everywhere, chattering constantly, reaching for her hand at every opportunity. The child was so hungry for affection that it made Eleanor's chest ache. "You're spoiling her," Lucy said one morning, watching Eleanor braid Hannah's hair with ribbons. "She'll just be worse when you leave." "I'm not leaving," Eleanor said calmly, finishing the braid. "That's what they all say." "I know." Eleanor turned to face Lucy. "But I mean it." Lucy's jaw tightened. She looked away, but not before Eleanor caught the flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. That afternoon, something changed. Eleanor was helping Hannah practice her letters when Lucy appeared in the doorway, a book clutched to her chest. "Miss Davis has a headache," she announced. Again. Miss Davis, the governess, seemed to have a headache most days. Eleanor suspected the young woman was simply overwhelmed and counting the days until she could leave. "I can help you with your lessons," Eleanor offered. Lucy's eyes narrowed. You're just a housekeeper." "I can read. I can do arithmetic. I had some schooling before I married." "Schooling where? In some dirt-poor farming town." The words were meant to sting, and they did. But Eleanor had been stung by worse. "In Pennsylvania," she replied evenly. "The minister there believed girls deserved education as much as boys. He taught me reading, writing, mathematics, and a bit of history." She paused. "I also taught myself bookkeeping when my husband and I ran our homestead. Someone had to manage the accounts." Lucy hesitated, clearly torn between her desire to reject everything Eleanor offered and her genuine need for help. Finally, she crossed the room and sat down at the table. "Fine, but don't treat me like I'm stupid." "I would never," Eleanor said seriously. "From what I've seen, you're one of the smartest children I've ever met." Lucy's cheeks flushed slightly, but she hid it by opening her book. "It's arithmetic. Long division. Miss Davis can't explain it properly." Eleanor looked at the problems Lucy had been working on. They were complex for a 10-year-old, but the girl had gotten most of them right. She'd just made a small error in carrying the remainder. "These are excellent," Eleanor said honestly. "You only made one small mistake. See here when you carried the remainder." She explained the error gently, without condescension. Lucy listened intently, her expression shifting from defensive to engaged. "Show me another one," Lucy demanded when Eleanor finished. They worked through problems for the next hour. Hannah played quietly nearby, content to practice her letters, while her sister studied. When they finally finished, Lucy looked at Eleanor with something new in her eyes. "You're actually good at this," she admitted grudgingly. "Thank you. Better than Miss Davis." "That's kind of you to say." Lucy was quiet for a moment. Then very softly she asked, "Did you teach your son before he died?" Eleanor's heart clenched. No one had asked about Samuel since she'd arrived. She'd assumed Caleb Weston had shared her history with the household staff, but perhaps not with the children. "He was too young," she said quietly. "Only 2. But I was planning to. I used to read to him every night just like I read to Hannah. I wanted him to love books the way I do." "What was his name?" "Samuel." "That's a nice name." Lucy's voice had lost its sharp edge. "I'm sorry he died." "Thank you." Eleanor swallowed hard. "I'm sorry your mother died too." Lucy nodded slowly, her gray eyes old beyond their years. "It's not fair, is it? The way people we love can just disappear." "No," Eleanor agreed. "It's not fair at all." They sat in silence for a moment. Two wounded souls recognizing each other across the gulf of age and experience. "Mrs. Sutton," Lucy said finally. "Yes. You can call me Lucy. Not Miss Lucy, just Lucy." It was such a small thing. Just a name. But Eleanor understood what it meant. It was the first crack in Lucy's armor, the first tiny step toward trust. "Thank you, Lucy. You can call me Ellie if you'd like." Lucy considered this. "Maybe, eventually." She stood up, gathering her books. "But don't think this means I trust you or anything." "Of course not. I'm just saying you're not as bad as the others. That's all." "I appreciate that." Lucy nodded once sharply and marched out of the room. But just before she disappeared, Eleanor caught the ghost of a smile on her face. Progress. That evening, Eleanor was summoned to Caleb Weston's study. She'd barely seen the man in the weeks since her arrival. He took his meals alone, spent his days managing the ranch, and retired to his study each night. When they did cross paths, he acknowledged her with a curt nod and nothing more. But now his foreman, Silas Cooper, was at the kitchen door with a message. "Mr. Weston wants to see you. His study. Now." Eleanor's stomach knotted with anxiety. Had she done something wrong? Was he sending her away? She smoothed her dress, one of Catherine's, dark blue and simple, and made her way to the study. The door was slightly ajar. She knocked anyway. "Come in." Caleb Weston sat behind a massive oak desk, papers spread before him, a lamp casting sharp shadows across his face. He looked tired, Eleanor realized. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying too much for too long. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Weston?" "Close the door." She did, her heart hammering. "Sit." She sat in the chair across from his desk, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. Weston studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes giving nothing away. Then he said, "Mrs. Holloway tells me you've been helping Lucy with her arithmetic." "Yes, sir. Miss Davis wasn't feeling well, and Lucy needed assistance. She says you're better at explaining it than the governess." "I don't know about that, sir. She also says Lucy called you by your first name today. Voluntarily." Eleanor blinked. She hadn't realized anyone had been listening. "She did, sir." "That hasn't happened before." Weston leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Not with any of the others. Lucy doesn't let people in." "She's been hurt," Eleanor said quietly. "She's protecting herself." "I know what she's doing." A flash of something pain maybe crossed his face. "I've been watching her do it for 7 years." Silence stretched between them. Eleanor waited, unsure what he wanted from her. Finally, Weston spoke again. "Hannah climbed into your lap the first day you arrived. She'd never done that before either. Usually she's shy with strangers, hangs back, waits to see if they're safe." "She's starving for affection, Mr. Weston. Any kindness would have—" "Don't." His voice sharpened. "Don't dismiss what you've done. I've watched women come and go from this house for 7 years. None of them got through to my girls the way you have. Not in 3 weeks. Not ever." Eleanor didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Weston stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "My wife was the heart of this family. When she died, that heart stopped beating. I tried to keep things going, tried to be enough for Lucy and Hannah, but I'm not." He stopped, his shoulders tight with tension. "I don't know how to be what they need. I never did." "You love them," Eleanor said softly. "They know that. Love isn't enough." He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw the devastation behind his stoic mask. Love doesn't braid hair or read bedtime stories or explain long division. Love doesn't hold them when they have nightmares. Love doesn't teach them how to be women someday. His voice cracked. "I've failed them, Mrs. Sutton. Every single day for 7 years I've failed them." "No." The word came out stronger than Eleanor intended. She stood forgetting her place, forgetting everything except the broken man in front of her. "You haven't failed them. You're still here. You're still fighting. You brought me into this house because you wanted something better for them. That's not failure. That's love in action." Weston stared at her, something shifting in his eyes. "My husband gave up." Eleanor continued, her voice shaking now. "When our son died, the grief swallowed him whole, and he couldn't find his way back. He stopped fighting. He stopped trying. He left me alone in that cabin with nothing but a note and a body to bury. Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't look away. You didn't do that. You stayed. You kept going. That matters, Mr. Weston. It matters more than you know. The silence that followed was profound. Weston's face had gone completely still, his gray eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her heart race. You don't know me, he said, finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what I've done, the mistakes I've made. I know enough. Eleanor held his gaze. I know you're a man who takes in starving strangers because his daughters need someone. I know you're a man who works himself to exhaustion, trying to hold everything together. I know you're a man who's been carrying grief for 7 years without ever letting yourself break. She paused. That's not weakness, Mr. Weston. That's strength, even if it doesn't feel like it. Something cracked in his expression. Just for a moment, she saw past the walls to the wounded man beneath. Then he rebuilt them, turning away, his voice hardening. I called you here to discuss wages. You've proven yourself reliable. Mrs. Holloway says you're the best help she's had in years. Starting next week, you'll receive $10 a month plus room and board. The abrupt shift threw Eleanor off balance. That's very generous, sir. It's fair compensation for fair work. He returned to his desk, shuffling papers, clearly done with the conversation. That's all, Mrs. Sutton. Eleanor stood there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. Then she nodded. Thank you, Mr. Weston. Good night. She was at the door when his voice stopped her. Mrs. Sutton. She turned back. Caleb Weston wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the papers in front of him, but his hands had stilled. What you said about my staying, he said quietly. About it mattering. No one's ever... He stopped, cleared his throat. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. She left the study with her heart pounding and her mind racing. Something had shifted tonight. She didn't know exactly what, but she felt it, a crack in the ice, a bridge being built across the chasm between them. It terrified her. And it gave her hope. November deepened into bitter cold. The snow came heavier now, blanketing Willow Creek in white, transforming the landscape into something from a dream. Eleanor's place in the household solidified with each passing day. She helped Mrs. Holloway with the cooking, supervised the girls' lessons, and slowly, carefully earned their trust. Lucy still tested her, still watched with those sharp gray eyes, waiting for the mask to slip. But the tests were gentler now, less about pushing Eleanor away and more about making sure she was real. What was your husband like? Lucy asked one evening as Eleanor helped her with her reading. The question caught Eleanor off guard, but she answered honestly. He was kind, quiet. He loved working with his hands, building things. When we first homesteaded, he built our cabin from nothing. Took him 3 months working every day from dawn to dusk. Did you love him? Yes, very much. Then why did he leave you? Eleanor's throat tightened. He didn't leave me exactly. The grief, it took him to a place I couldn't follow. Losing Samuel broke something in him that I couldn't fix, no matter how hard I tried. Lucy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Papa's broken too. Has been ever since Mama died. I know. Do you think he can be fixed? Eleanor considered the question carefully. I think broken people can heal. Not all the way, maybe. The cracks are always there. But they can learn to live with them. They can find reasons to keep going. What's Papa's reason? You, Eleanor said simply. You and Hannah. You're the reason he gets up every morning. You're the reason he keeps fighting. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. Sometimes I think he wishes it was him who died, instead of Mama. The words hit Eleanor like a punch to the chest. Oh, Lucy, no. It's true. I see it in his eyes sometimes, when he looks at Hannah especially. Hannah looks like Mama. Everyone says so. Eleanor reached out and took Lucy's hand, holding it firmly. Listen to me. Your father loves both of you more than anything in this world. Yes, he's sad. Yes, he misses your mother. But he doesn't wish he was dead. He couldn't, because then he'd have to leave you and Hannah, and that would be worse than any grief. How do you know? Because I've been where he is. After Samuel died after Thomas. She swallowed hard. There were moments when I wanted to give up. When I thought the pain would never stop, and the only way to escape it was to stop living. But then I'd think about the people who still needed me, and I'd keep going. One more day. One more hour. One more breath. Lucy's hand tightened in hers. Is that why you came here, because you needed a reason to keep breathing? Yes, Eleanor admitted. And I found one. Two, actually. Us. You. Lucy was silent for a long moment. Then, without warning, she threw herself into Eleanor's arms, burying her face against her shoulder. Don't leave, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, I know I said I didn't trust you, but I do. I do trust you. Please don't leave like all the others. Eleanor held her tightly, tears streaming down her own face. I won't, she promised. I swear to you, Lucy. I'm not going anywhere. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the lamplight, while the snow fell softly outside. So, Hannah's 7th birthday fell on the 1st of December. Eleanor spent days preparing, secretly coordinating with Mrs. Holloway to make the celebration special. They baked a cake together, chocolate Hannah's favorite, and Eleanor stayed up late, sewing a new dress for Emma, Hannah's beloved doll. When the day arrived, Hannah woke to find her room decorated with ribbons and paper flowers that Eleanor had made. For me, she gasped, her blue eyes wide with wonder. All for you, Eleanor said, kneeling beside her bed. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Hannah threw her arms around Eleanor's neck, squeezing tight. This is the best birthday ever. The celebration continued throughout the day. Mrs. Holloway made all of Hannah's favorite foods. Silas Cooper carved a small wooden horse as a gift. Even Garrett the steward, who'd been so hostile at first, presented Hannah with a bag of peppermint candies. But the biggest surprise came from Caleb Weston. He appeared at dinner that evening, something he rarely did anymore. Hannah's face lit up when she saw him. Papa, you came? Of course I came. His voice was gruff, but his eyes were soft as he looked at his younger daughter. It's not every day my little girl turns 7. He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a locket, silver and delicate, with a tiny photograph of Catherine inside. That was your mother's, Caleb said quietly. She wanted you to have it when you were old enough. I think 7 is old enough. Hannah stared at the locket, then at the photograph of the mother she'd never known. Tears welled in her eyes. She's so pretty, she whispered. She was. Caleb's voice cracked slightly. And she would have loved you so much, Hannah. She did love you, even though she only had you for a few hours. You were the last thing she saw before. He couldn't finish. Eleanor watched his jaw clench, watched him fight for control. Hannah climbed down from her chair and walked to her father. Without a word, she wrapped her small arms around him. It's okay, Papa, she said softly. I love you too. Something broke in Caleb Weston's face. He gathered his daughter in his arms, holding her tight, and for the first time since Eleanor had arrived at Willow Creek, she saw him cry. Silent tears quickly wiped away, but tears nonetheless. Lucy watched from across the table, her expression complicated. Then she stood, walked to her father, and put her hand on his shoulder. We're okay, Papa, she said quietly. We're going to be okay. Caleb looked up at his older daughter, then at Eleanor, who stood frozen by the doorway, uncertain whether to stay or go. Thank you, he said, his voice rough, for all of this, for making today special. It was mostly Mrs. Holloway. Eleanor demurred. No. Caleb shook his head. It was you. Mrs. Holloway told me you planned everything. The decorations, the dress for Emma, the cake. He paused. You made my daughter happy. That's worth more than I can say. Eleanor didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and the house had quieted, she found herself on the back porch watching the snow fall in the moonlight. She heard footsteps behind her, but didn't turn. You'll catch cold, Caleb said, coming to stand beside her. I don't mind the cold anymore. I used to hate it, but now... She shrugged. Now it reminds me I'm alive. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You've changed things around here. You know that, don't you? I just did what needed doing. No, it's more than that. He turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his features were softer than she'd ever seen them. My girls are different now. Happier. More like they were before everything fell apart. They just needed someone to stay, Eleanor said softly. They needed you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to explore. I should go inside, Eleanor said finally. Early morning tomorrow. Of course. Caleb stepped back, giving her room to pass. But as she reached the door, he spoke again. Mrs. Sutton. She turned. Ellie? He said her name slowly, like he was testing how it felt. I'm glad you came here. I'm glad you stayed. Her heart stuttered. So am I. She went inside before she could say anything else, but she felt his eyes on her back all the way down the hallway. That night, lying in bed, Eleanor allowed herself to feel something she'd been suppressing for weeks. It wasn't just gratitude she felt for Caleb Weston. It wasn't just respect or admiration. It was something deeper, something dangerous. She pushed the feeling down, burying it beneath all her carefully constructed walls. She was here for the girls, she reminded herself. Nothing more. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't entirely true anymore. The next morning brought trouble. Eleanor was helping Mrs. Holloway with breakfast when Silas Cooper burst through the kitchen door, his weathered face grim. Ryder coming up the main road, he announced. Fast. Doesn't look friendly. Mrs. Holloway's hands stilled on the bread she was kneading. Who is it? Can't tell yet, but whoever it is, they're in a hurry. Caleb appeared moments later, already reaching for his coat. Stay inside, he ordered. Keep the girls upstairs until I know what this is about. Eleanor nodded, already moving toward the stairs. But something in Silas's expression made her pause. What is it? She asked quietly. What aren't you saying? Silas exchanged a look with Caleb. The Ryder? He's coming from the direction of Blackwood's ranch. The name meant nothing to Eleanor, but she saw Caleb's face darken with something that looked like hatred. Blackwood, he said flatly. Of course. Who's Blackwood? Eleanor asked. Caleb's jaw tightened. Someone who's been trying to destroy me for 15 years. And if he's sending riders to my door, it means he's finally making his move. He strode out without another word, leaving Eleanor with a knot of dread in her stomach. She didn't know who Marcus Blackwood was or what he wanted, but she had a terrible feeling she was about to find out. The rider was young, barely 20, with the nervous energy of someone delivering news he knew would cause trouble. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, nearly stumbling in the snow. Message for Mr. Weston, he announced, pulling a sealed envelope from his coat. From Mr. Blackwood. Caleb took the envelope without a word, his face carved from stone. He didn't open it, just stared at the wax seal as if it were a coiled snake. Tell your boss I'll read it when I'm good and ready, he said coldly. Now get off my land. The young man hesitated. Mr. Blackwood said I was to wait for a response. Then Mr. Blackwood is going to be disappointed. Caleb stepped forward, and the rider stumbled backward. I said get off my land. Don't make me say it again. The rider scrambled onto his horse and disappeared down the road in a cloud of snow. Caleb stood motionless, watching until he was out of sight. What does it say? Silas asked. Caleb broke the seal and scanned the letter. His expression didn't change, but Eleanor saw his knuckles go white where he gripped the paper. "He's calling in my loan," Caleb said flatly. "Says I have 30 days to pay the full balance, or he'll petition the court to seize Willow Creek as collateral." "That's impossible," Silas protested. "You've never missed a payment. The bank has no grounds to—" "Blackwood bought the bank." Caleb's voice was eerily calm. "6 months ago, apparently. He's been waiting for the right moment to spring this trap." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She knew exactly what this meant. She'd lived through it herself in Kansas, watched everything she loved get stripped away by men with money and lawyers and no conscience. "Can he do that?" she asked quietly. "Legally?" Caleb finally looked at her, and the devastation in his eyes made her heart clench. "If he owns the bank, he can do whatever he wants. That's how power works." "There has to be something," Silas insisted. "A lawyer, a judge, someone who can—" "Blackwood owns half the judges in Montana Territory." Caleb crumpled the letter in his fist. "He's been planning this for years, ever since Catherine chose me over him." The words hung in the air like a confession. Eleanor stared at him. "Catherine?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Before I came to Montana, Blackwood had his eye on her. Her family had land influence. He wanted to merge their holdings with his, create an empire. But Catherine didn't love him. She loved me." His voice roughened. "Blackwood has never forgiven me for that, for taking what he thought was his." "So this isn't about the ranch," Eleanor said slowly. "It's about revenge." "It's about both. He wants Willow Creek because of the water rights. Our creek feeds into his property. Whoever controls this land controls the water supply for half the valley." Caleb turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. "But more than that, he wants to destroy me, to prove that Catherine made the wrong choice." "What are you going to do?" Caleb was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't know." Those 3 words, spoken by a man who always seemed to know exactly what to do, terrified Eleanor more than anything else could have. The next few days were tense. Caleb spent hours in his study, poring over financial records, sending letters, meeting with lawyers from town. None of it seemed to help. Each evening he emerged looking more defeated than the day before. The girls sensed something was wrong. Lucy grew quieter, more watchful. Hannah clung to Eleanor with renewed desperation, as if afraid she might disappear. "Is Papa going to be okay?" Hannah asked one night as Eleanor tucked her into bed. "Of course he is," Eleanor said, forcing confidence she didn't feel. "Your Papa is the strongest man I know. He looks sad, sadder than usual. He's just worried about grown-up things. But it'll work out. You'll see." Hannah studied her with those big blue eyes. "Promise?" Eleanor hesitated. She'd sworn never to make promises she couldn't keep. But looking at this child who'd already lost so much, she couldn't bring herself to offer anything less than hope. "I promise," she whispered. "Everything's going to be okay." She prayed she wasn't lying. A week after the letter arrived, Marcus Blackwood himself came to Willow Creek. Eleanor was in the parlor with the girls when she heard the commotion outside. Hoofbeats, men's voices, Caleb's sharp command to stay back. She moved to the window and saw a group of riders in the yard led by a man on a glossy black stallion. Even from a distance, she could see he was wealthy. His clothes were too fine for ranch work, his bearing too arrogant for honest labor. He dismounted with the casual confidence of someone who expected the world to arrange itself around him. "Stay here," Eleanor told the girls. "Don't come downstairs until I come get you." "Who is that man?" Lucy asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "No one important. Just stay here." Eleanor hurried downstairs, her heart pounding. She reached the front hall just as Caleb opened the door. "Blackwood." His voice was ice. "You're not welcome here." Now, Caleb." The man who stepped inside was perhaps 50, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Is that any way to greet an old friend? We were never friends. No, I suppose not. Blackwood's gaze traveled around the entryway, assessing, calculating. Though we might have been if you hadn't stolen what was mine. Catherine wasn't yours to steal. She made her own choice. Ah, yes, Catherine. Blackwood's smile sharpened. Such a tragic loss. Though I hear you found consolation. His eyes landed on Eleanor, and something in his expression made her skin crawl. He looked at her the way a predator looked at prey. Mrs. Sutton, isn't it? He stepped closer, and Eleanor forced herself not to retreat. The mysterious widow who appeared out of nowhere and wormed her way into this household. I've heard quite a bit about you. Then you've heard more than I've told anyone, Eleanor replied coolly. Because I don't know you, Mr. Blackwood, and I don't discuss my business with strangers. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or interest. Neither was good. She's got fire, he said to Caleb. I can see why you kept her around, though I wonder what the townspeople would think if they knew the truth about her past. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Caleb demanded. Blackwood's smile widened. Did your Mrs. Sutton tell you about Kansas, about the homestead she and her husband lost, about the debts they owed? My debts were fabricated, Eleanor said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. The men who took my land were liars and thieves. That's not what the records say. Blackwood pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to Caleb. I had my people do some digging. Fascinating what you can find when you know where to look. Caleb unfolded the paper, his face darkening as he read. Eleanor's heart hammered. She didn't know what lies Blackwood had manufactured, but she knew they would be convincing. Men like him always had convincing lies. This is garbage, Caleb said, finally crumpling the paper. Forged documents and hearsay. Perhaps, Blackwood shrugged. But will the good people of Silver Falls see it that way? Will the judge who will be deciding the fate of your ranch? He let the threat hang in the air, watching their faces with obvious satisfaction. What do you want, Blackwood? Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. What I've always wanted. Willow Creek Ranch, including all water rights and livestock. Sign the deed over to me and I'll make your financial problems disappear. I'll even let you keep enough money to relocate somewhere far away from Montana. And if I refuse, then I'll take it anyway. Through the courts if possible, through other means if necessary. His eyes flickered to Eleanor. And I'll make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what kind of woman you've been harboring under your roof. A fraud, a debtor, perhaps even a thief. That's a lie, Eleanor said hotly. Is it? Blackwood stepped closer to her, and she saw the cruelty beneath his polished exterior. You arrived here with nothing. No references, no family, no proof of who you claim to be. Just a sad story and a pretty face. How do we know anything you've told us is true? Because I know, Caleb said, moving to stand between Eleanor and Blackwood. I know who she is and what she's been through. Your lies don't change that. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. My, such loyalty. I wonder if you'll feel the same way when your reputation is in ruins and your daughters are homeless. The mention of the girls made Caleb's hands clench into fists. Eleanor saw the rage building in him, the desperate urge to strike. Get out, he said, his voice barely controlled. Get out of my house before I do something we'll both regret. Blackwood smiled unperturbed. 30 days, Caleb. That's all you have. I suggest you use them wisely. He turned and walked out without a backward glance, his men following close behind. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, leaving silence in their wake. Caleb stood motionless, staring at the closed door. Eleanor could see the tension in every line of his body, the fury he was fighting to contain. Caleb, she said softly. Don't. His voice cracked. Just Don't." He strode past her and disappeared into his study. The door slammed so hard, the whole house shook. Eleanor stood alone in the hallway, her heart breaking for him, for herself, for the girls upstairs, who had no idea their world was about to fall apart. She didn't know how to fight a man like Blackwood. She'd tried before in Kansas and lost everything. But this time was different. This time, she had something worth fighting for. She just had to figure out how. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities and dead ends. Blackwood had money power connections. They had nothing but a ranch that was already mortgaged and a community that would believe whatever lies he chose to tell. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, hesitant. A child's footsteps. She rose and opened her door to find Hannah standing there, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I had a bad dream." Hannah's voice was small and broken. "I dreamed we had to leave Willow Creek and go somewhere scary, and you weren't there anymore." Eleanor gathered the child in her arms, holding her tight. "That's not going to happen. Promise?" There was that word again. Promise. The word that had gotten her in trouble before. But looking at Hannah's terrified face, Eleanor knew she couldn't offer anything less. "I promise," she said. "No matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." She carried Hannah back to the nursery, tucking her into bed beside the already sleeping Lucy. As she smoothed the blankets over both girls, she felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. These children had already lost their mother. They would not lose their home. Not if she had anything to say about it. Eleanor made her way downstairs, not sure what she was looking for. Perhaps just movement action, something to combat the helplessness threatening to swallow her whole. A light was burning in the study. The door was ajar. She hesitated, then knocked softly. "Come in." Caleb sat slumped in his chair, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the desk beside him. He looked up when she entered, and the devastation in his eyes made her breath catch. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice rough. "No." "Join the club." He gestured vaguely at the chair across from him. "Sit. Misery loves company, or so they say." Eleanor sat folding her hands in her lap. "How bad is it?" Caleb laughed bitterly. "Bad. Blackwood's been buying up my debts for months. The bank loan is just the beginning. I owe money to suppliers to the railroad to a dozen different creditors. All of them now controlled by him. Can you pay any of it? Not enough. Not in 30 days. He took a long drink from the whiskey bottle. I've spent 15 years building this ranch, poured everything I had into it, everything Catherine and I dreamed of together. His voice cracked. And now I'm going to lose it because one man can't accept that a woman chose someone else. There has to be something we can do, Eleanor said. Someone who can help. Who? Everyone in this territory is either in Blackwood's pocket or too scared of him to stand up. Caleb shook his head. I've fought him for years, Ellie. Every time I thought I was winning, he found a new way to attack. I'm tired. I'm so damn tired. Eleanor leaned forward. Then let me fight for you. He looked up, confusion mixing with the despair in his eyes. What? I know how men like Blackwood operate. I've seen it before. They count on their victims being too beaten down, too afraid to push back. They expect you to roll over and accept defeat. Her voice strengthened. But I didn't roll over when they took my farm in Kansas. I fought until I had nothing left. And I'll do the same thing here. You lost in Kansas, Caleb pointed out quietly. Because I was alone. Because I had no one. Eleanor reached out and took his hand, feeling the roughness of his palm, the warmth beneath the calluses. You're not alone, Caleb. You have people who believe in you. People who will stand with you. People like you? Yes, people like me. They stared at each other across the desk, something shifting in the air between them. Eleanor's heart raced, but she didn't look away. Why? Caleb asked softly. Why do you care so much about what happens to this ranch? To me. Because I love you, she thought. The words rose up unbidden, startling her with their truth. But she couldn't say that, not now. Not when everything was falling apart. Because you gave me a chance when no one else would, she said instead. Because your daughters have become the closest thing to family I've had in years. Because this place feels like home, and I'm not ready to lose another home. Caleb was silent for a long moment. Then his fingers tightened around hers. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. I don't deserve any of this. That's not true. It is. His gray eyes were dark with old pain. I wasn't a good husband, Ellie. I was distant, preoccupied. I took Catherine for granted, and then she was gone before I could fix it. I've spent 7 years punishing myself for that. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe losing everything is payment for my failures. No. Eleanor's voice was fierce. Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare use your guilt as an excuse to give up. He looked up sharply. You made mistakes, she continued. We all do. But your daughters need you. This ranch needs you. And you do not get to surrender because you've decided you deserve to lose. She leaned closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. Your girls lost their mother. They will not lose their father too. Not to grief, not to guilt, and not to a petty tyrant like Marcus Blackwood. Do you understand me? Something sparked in Caleb's eyes. Life. Fight. The things she'd been afraid had been extinguished forever. You're remarkable, he said quietly. You know that? I'm stubborn. There's a difference. No. He shook his head slowly. You're remarkable. The way you came into this house and brought it back to life. The way you love my daughters like they're your own. The way you refuse to give up even when everything looks hopeless. He paused, his thumb stroking gently across her knuckles. I've been dead inside for 7 years, Ellie. And you make me want to live again. Eleanor's breath caught. Caleb, I know this isn't the time. I know we're in the middle of a crisis, and everything is falling apart. He stood drawing her up with him, their hands still clasped. But I need you to know that whatever happens with Blackwood, whatever happens with the ranch, you matter to me. Not just as someone who cares for my daughters, not just as an employee. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. You matter as you, Ellie, the woman who walked through my gates with nothing and gave me everything. Tears burned Eleanor's eyes. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, wanted to confess everything she'd been hiding in her heart for weeks. But before she could speak, a sound from upstairs froze them both. Lucy's voice, high and terrified. Papa! Papa! Come quick! There's men outside with torches. They ran. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, bursting into the girls' room where both children stood at the window, their faces pale with fear. Eleanor looked out and felt her blood run cold. A dozen riders surrounded the house, their torches casting flickering shadows across the snow. At their head sat a man she didn't recognize, but she knew who had sent him. Caleb Weston, the man shouted. Come out and face what's coming to you. Caleb's face hardened into something Eleanor had never seen before. Cold, deadly, the face of a man who had nothing left to lose. Stay here with the girls, he said, his voice flat. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Caleb, you can't go out there alone. I said stay here. He pulled a rifle from behind his bedroom door, checked that it was loaded. Whatever happens, protect my daughters. He was gone before she could argue. Eleanor gathered both girls close, her heart hammering with terror. Through the window, she watched Caleb stride across the yard, rifle in hand, facing down a dozen armed men without flinching. Mrs. Sutton, Lucy whispered, her voice shaking. What's happening? Who are those men? Eleanor couldn't answer. She could only watch as the man she loved walked toward what might be his death, and pray that somehow they would all survive this night. Caleb walked into the yard, with his rifle raised, his boots crunching against the frozen snow. The torchlight turned his face into sharp angles and deep shadows, making him look like a man carved from stone. "You've got 30 seconds to get off my land," he called out, his voice carrying across the cold night air. "After that, I start shooting." The leader of the riders laughed. He was a big man, rough-faced, with the look of someone who enjoyed violence. "Mr. Blackwood sends his regards, says he's tired of waiting for you to see reason. Blackwood can go to hell, and so can you." Now that's not very neighborly. The man urged his horse forward a few steps. "We're just here to deliver a message. Sign over the ranch, and this all goes away. Keep being stubborn and well." He gestured at the torches surrounding them. "Fire's a terrible thing, spreads so fast, especially in winter when everything's dry." Eleanor watched from the window, her arms tight around both girls. Hannah was crying silently. Lucy stood rigid, her small hands clenched into fists. "He's going to get hurt," Lucy whispered. "We have to do something. Your father knows what he's doing." Eleanor said, praying it was true. "We have to trust him." But even as she spoke, she saw more riders emerging from the darkness, not Blackwood's men. These came from the bunkhouse, from the barn, from every corner of Willow Creek Ranch. Silas Cooper led them, his weathered face grim, a shotgun resting across his saddle. "Seems to me," Silas called out, "that you boys are outnumbered." The leader's confident smile faltered. He counted heads quickly, his expression souring when he realized Silas was right. The Willow Creek Ranch hands had surrounded Blackwood's men without anyone noticing. "This ain't over," the leader snarled at Caleb. "Blackwood always gets what he wants, one way or another." "Not this time." Caleb's voice was cold as the winter wind. "Now get off my land before I let my men show you what happens to trespassers in Montana." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Eleanor held her breath, certain that violence was about to explode. Then the leader jerked his horse around. "Let's go, boys. We delivered the message." The riders retreated into the darkness, their torches bobbing like fireflies, until they disappeared entirely. Only then did Caleb lower his rifle. Eleanor sagged with relief. "Is it over?" Hannah asked, her voice tiny. "For now," Eleanor said. "Come on, let's go see your father." She led the girls downstairs, arriving in the yard just as Caleb was thanking his men. He looked up when he saw them, and for a moment, raw relief flooded his face. Then Hannah broke away from Eleanor and ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. "Papa, I was so scared." Caleb held her tight, his eyes closing. "I know, sweetheart. I know. But you're safe now. Everything's okay." Lucy hung back. Her arms crossed, her expression conflicted. Eleanor understood. The girl was old enough to know that everything was not okay, that the men would be back, that tonight was only a temporary reprieve. "Lucy." Caleb extended his hand toward his older daughter. "Come here." She went reluctantly, allowing herself to be pulled into the embrace. Caleb held both his daughters, and Eleanor saw the tears he was fighting to hide. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised them. "Either of you, no matter what." Later, after the girls had been settled back in bed and the ranch hands had returned to their posts, Eleanor found Caleb in the kitchen, washing blood from his hands. She hadn't noticed he was hurt. "What happened?" She rushed forward, taking his hand to examine it. "Just a scratch. One of their horses spooked caught me with a hoof." He winced as she probed the wound. "It's nothing." "It needs bandaging." Eleanor reached for the clean cloths Mrs. Holloway kept in the cupboard. "Sit down." He sat watching her as she cleaned and wrapped the wound with gentle efficiency. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "On the homestead. Thomas was always hurting himself on something. I got plenty of practice patching him up." She tied off the bandage and looked up to find his gray eyes fixed on her face. "What, you stayed?" "Of course I stayed." You could have run. When those men showed up with torches, you could have grabbed the girls and fled out the back. No one would have blamed you. Eleanor sat back, meeting his gaze steadily. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. I meant it. Even now, even knowing what Blackwood is capable of. Especially now. She reached out and touched his face, surprising them both. I've spent 8 months running Caleb, running from my past, from my grief, from everything that hurt. I'm tired of running. This is my home now. You and the girls are my family, and I will not abandon my family. Caleb turned his head, pressing his lips briefly to her palm. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected that Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes. What are we going to do? She whispered. Fight. His voice was rough but determined. We're going to fight with everything we have. How Blackwood has money power, half the territory in his pocket. Then we'll find the other half. Caleb stood new energy in his movements. Blackwood's made enemies over the years. People he's cheated, people he's threatened. If I can find them, convince them to stand together, maybe we can build something strong enough to push back. Do you really think that's possible? I don't know. He met her eyes honestly. But I have to try. For the girls. For this ranch. For you. The word hung between them. For you. There's something else, Eleanor said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. The records Blackwood used against me. He said they came from Kansas, but I know those records were destroyed when I left. The courthouse burned down 6 months after I was driven out. Caleb's eyes sharpened. You're saying he fabricated them? I'm saying he couldn't have gotten them legitimately, which means someone helped him create false documents. Eleanor leaned forward. If we can prove they're forgeries, we can prove he's been operating in bad faith. That might be enough to get a judge to look more carefully at his other claims. It would be our word against his, unless we find evidence. Eleanor's mind was racing now. Blackwood's not stupid. He keeps records. He documents everything. If he paid someone to forge those papers, there'll be a trail. Money correspondence something. And how exactly do we get access to Blackwood's private records? Eleanor hesitated. What she was about to suggest was dangerous, possibly illegal, definitely reckless. But what choice did they have? His household staff, she said. Blackwood treats his servants like dirt. I've heard the talk in town. If we could find someone willing to help us, someone with access to his study, that's a hell of a risk. So is losing everything. They stared at each other across the kitchen table, both understanding the weight of what they were considering. Finally, Caleb nodded slowly. I know someone, a maid who worked for Blackwood years ago. He dismissed her when she got pregnant, refused to pay what he owed her. She has family in Silver Falls. Will she help us? For a chance to see Blackwood brought down? A grim smile crossed Caleb's face. I think she might. The next morning, Caleb rode into town to find the former maid, a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Eleanor stayed at the ranch trying to maintain normalcy for the girls, while her mind churned with worry. She was helping Lucy with her reading when Mrs. Holloway appeared in the doorway, her face pale. There's someone here to see you, Mrs. Sutton. A man from town. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Blackwood. No, the sheriff. Eleanor exchanged a look with Lucy, then stood smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Stay here with your sister. I'll be right back. Sheriff Thomas Dawson was waiting in the front parlor, his hat in his hands, his expression uncomfortable. He was a large man in his 50s with a graying mustache and eyes that had seen too much. Mrs. Sutton. He nodded awkwardly. I'm sorry to trouble you. Sheriff, what can I do for you? I've received a complaint. He shifted his weight, clearly unhappy with his errand. From Marcus Blackwood. He's claiming you're a fraud, that you came to Montana under false pretenses, that you have outstanding debts in Kansas that you've been evading. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Those claims are lies. Maybe so, but Blackwood's demanding, I arrest you pending investigation. Arrest me. Eleanor's voice rose with disbelief. On what grounds having debts isn't a crime? Fraud is, so is theft, which he's also alleging. The sheriff's expression was pained. Look, Mrs. Sutton, I don't want to do this. I've heard nothing but good things about you since you came to Silver Falls, but Blackwood's a powerful man and he's making a lot of noise. So you're just going to let him use you as a weapon against innocent people? I'm going to do my job. Dawson's voice hardened slightly. But I'm also going to do it fairly. I'm not arresting you today. I'm giving you a chance to prove your innocence, but you need to appear at the courthouse tomorrow morning for a formal hearing. Judge Patterson will listen to both sides and make a ruling. Judge Patterson is in Blackwood's pocket. He's the only judge we have. The sheriff put his hat back on. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sutton. I truly am. But this is how the law works. After he left, Eleanor stood in the empty parlor, her whole body shaking. Everything was falling apart. Blackwood was moving faster than they'd anticipated, attacking from every direction at once. Mrs. Sutton. She turned to find Lucy standing in the doorway, her young face pale with fear. I heard everything, Lucy said quietly. That man wants to take you away. Eleanor knelt down, taking Lucy's hands in hers. He's trying to, but I'm not going to let him. How can you stop him? He's rich and powerful, and everyone does what he says. Not everyone. Eleanor squeezed Lucy's hands firmly. Your father is fighting for us, and so am I. We're not going to give up Lucy, no matter how hard it gets. Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. I don't want you to go away. I don't want to lose you like we lost Mama. Eleanor pulled the girl into her arms, holding her tight. You're not going to lose me. I promise you that. I will do whatever it takes to stay with you and Hannah and your father. Whatever it takes. I love you, Mrs. Sutton, Lucy whispered. Is it okay if I say that I know you're not our real Mama, but I love you anyway? Eleanor's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same moment. It's more than okay, she said, her voice breaking. I love you too, Lucy. Both of you. So much. They held each other in the parlor while the winter sun crept across the floor, two broken souls finding strength and connection. When Caleb returned that evening, Eleanor told him about the sheriff's visit. She watched his face darken with fury. That son of a bitch, he growled. He's not even trying to hide it anymore. The hearing's tomorrow morning. If Patterson rules against me, they'll take me to jail. That's not going to happen. Caleb, you can't promise that. Blackwood controls everything. The bank, the judges, the sheriff. He doesn't control me. Caleb took her by the shoulders, his grip firm but gentle. Listen to me. I talked to Sarah Jenkins. She's willing to help. She says there's a man still working at Blackwood's ranch, a bookkeeper named Miller, who's been keeping records of all Blackwood's dirty dealings. Blackmail, bribery, fraud, everything. Eleanor's breath caught. Can she get them? She thinks so. Miller is her brother. He's been waiting for years for a chance to bring Blackwood down. He just needed someone willing to stand with him. How long will it take? She's riding out tonight. If everything goes well, she'll have the documents by morning. The hearing's at 9 o'clock. I know. Caleb's jaw tightened. We'll have to stall somehow. Give her time to get back. And if she doesn't make it, then we fight anyway. We tell the truth and hope someone's willing to listen. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and clear. Eleanor dressed carefully in her best dress, the dark blue one that had belonged to Catherine. She braided her hair, pinned it up, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was terrified, but she was also determined. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. You've survived worse. The girls were waiting downstairs, both dressed in their Sunday clothes. Mrs. Holloway had insisted on coming along with Silas and several of the ranch hands. Whatever happened today, Eleanor would not face it alone. Caleb helped her into the wagon, his hand lingering on hers longer than necessary. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "I want you to know something." "What?" He looked at her with those gray eyes, and for once, all his walls were down. "I love you, Eleanor Sutton. I've been fighting it for weeks because I was afraid, because I thought I didn't deserve another chance at happiness. But I'm done being afraid. I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "I love you too." He kissed her, then right there in front of everyone. A fierce, desperate kiss that said everything words couldn't. "Let's go fight for our future," he said, when they finally pulled apart. The courthouse in Silver Falls was packed. Word had spread about the hearing, and it seemed like half the town had turned out to watch. Eleanor saw familiar faces in the crowd, people she'd met in passing, shopkeepers and farmers and their wives. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked skeptical. Most just looked curious. Marcus Blackwood sat at the front of the room, flanked by his lawyer and several well-dressed associates. He smiled when Eleanor entered, and the triumph in his expression made her stomach turn. Judge Patterson called the room to order, his gavel banging against the wooden podium. "This hearing is convened to address accusations made by Mr. Marcus Blackwood against Mrs. Eleanor Sutton," he announced. "Mr. Blackwood, present your case." Blackwood's lawyer stood, a slick man with oiled hair and cold eyes. He laid out the accusations methodically. Fraud, theft, false identity, outstanding debts. He produced the forged documents, presented them as evidence, painted Eleanor as a con artist who'd wormed her way into the Weston household to steal their fortune. "This woman is a predator," the lawyer concluded. "She preys on vulnerable widowers and their children. She must be stopped before she destroys another family." The crowd murmured. Eleanor felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. "Mrs. Sutton," Judge Patterson said, "do you wish to respond?" Eleanor stood, her legs trembling, but her voice steady. "Every word that man just said is a lie." "Can you prove it?" "I can prove that those documents are forgeries. I can prove that Mr. Blackwood has been manufacturing evidence to destroy me and Mr. Weston because he wants to steal Willow Creek Ranch." "Strong accusations," the judge said skeptically. "Do you have evidence to support them?" Eleanor hesitated. Sarah Jenkins hadn't arrived yet. They were out of time. "I have my word," she said, "and I have the truth. My husband Thomas Sutton died by his own hand after our son Samuel succumbed to fever. Our homestead in Kansas was seized through fraudulent debts manufactured by men exactly like Marcus Blackwood, men who use money and power to destroy anyone who gets in their way." "Your word is not evidence, Mrs. Sutton." "Then let me give you something better." She turned to face the crowd. "Let me give you my story. The real one, not the lies Blackwood has invented." She told them everything. About Pennsylvania, about her marriage, about the homestead, and the dream she and Thomas had built together. About Samuel's death, about Thomas's suicide, about the vultures who'd descended to pick apart what remained. She told them about walking for months with nothing but the clothes on her back. About doors slammed in her face, about being called trash, and worse. About arriving at Willow Creek Ranch ready to die, and finding instead a reason to live. "I am not a fraud," she concluded, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "I am not a thief. I am a woman who lost everything and found the strength to start again, and I will not let a man like Marcus Blackwood take that away from me." The silence stretched. Then from somewhere in the crowd someone began to clap. It was Mrs. Hartford, the schoolteacher. She stood applauding, her face wet with tears. Others joined her. One by one, people rose to their feet, clapping, showing their support for the woman who'd bared her soul before them. Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. She's manipulating you all. I have something to say." The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to look. A woman stood in the doorway, travel-worn and breathing hard, clutching a leather satchel to her chest. Sarah Jenkins had arrived. "I have evidence," she announced, striding forward. Documents from Marcus Blackwood's own records. Proof that he forged the papers against Mrs. Sutton. Proof that he's been bribing officials throughout Montana Territory. Proof that he tried to have Caleb Weston murdered last winter. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Blackwood leaped to his feet. This is outrageous. Those documents are stolen property. They prove nothing. They prove everything. Sarah handed the satchel to Judge Patterson. My brother has been Blackwood's bookkeeper for 12 years. He's documented every crime, every bribe, every threat. It's all there, Your Honor. Everything you need to see who Marcus Blackwood really is. The judge opened the satchel and began reading. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. These are serious allegations, he said weakly. They're not allegations. Caleb stepped forward, his voice strong. They're facts. And if you have any integrity left, Your Honor, you'll dismiss the charges against Mrs. Sutton and hold Blackwood accountable for his crimes. The crowd roared its approval. Judge Patterson looked from Caleb to Blackwood to the damning documents in his hands. Eleanor could see him calculating, trying to figure out which way the wind was blowing. Finally, he banged his gavel. The charges against Mrs. Eleanor Sutton are dismissed. As for Mr. Blackwood, he hesitated, clearly afraid of the powerful man glaring at him. Given the serious nature of these allegations, I'm ordering his immediate detention pending a full investigation. You can't do this, Blackwood shouted as the sheriff moved toward him. I own this town. I own all of you. Not anymore, the sheriff said grimly. Marcus Blackwood, you're under arrest. Eleanor watched them drag Blackwood away, his face twisted with impotent fury. She felt Caleb's arm slip around her waist, felt the girls press close on either side. It's over? Lucy whispered disbelief in her voice. It's really over. It's over. Eleanor confirmed, her own voice shaking. Around them, the townspeople of Silver Falls crowded close, offering congratulations, apologies for ever doubting her promises of support. Eleanor accepted it all in a daze. They had won. Against all odds, against a man who'd seemed invincible, they had won. But as Caleb pulled her close and kissed her forehead, Eleanor knew that the real victory wasn't the defeat of Marcus Blackwood. The real victory was standing right here in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the family she'd found. She had come to Montana with nothing. Now she had everything. The weeks following Marcus Blackwood's arrest transformed Silver Falls in ways no one had anticipated. Documents from his private records revealed a web of corruption stretching across Montana Territory, implicating bankers, judges, and businessmen who'd grown fat on his bribes. One by one, they fell, their empires crumbling like houses built on sand. Caleb's debts were forgiven when investigators discovered Blackwood had manipulated the loan terms illegally. The bank, now under new management, offered a formal apology and returned every penny of overpaid interest. Willow Creek Ranch was safe, but for Eleanor, the real transformation was happening inside the White House, with green shutters in the quiet moments between the dramatic ones. She was helping Hannah practice her letters one afternoon when Lucy appeared in the doorway, her expression unusually vulnerable. Mrs. Sutton, can I ask you something? Of course. Eleanor set down the chalk and gave Lucy her full attention. Lucy twisted her hands together, a nervous habit Eleanor had come to recognize. Now that everything's settled with Mr. Blackwood and the ranch is safe, are you still going to stay? The question hit Eleanor square in the chest. What do you mean? I mean, you came here because you needed work. You needed shelter. But now Papa can pay you properly and you could go anywhere you wanted. Find somewhere better. Somewhere that isn't full of bad memories and broken people. Eleanor stood and crossed to where Lucy stood, kneeling down to meet her eyes directly. Lucy Weston, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I didn't stay because I needed work. I stayed because I found something here I thought I'd lost forever. What? A family. Eleanor's voice caught. You and Hannah and your father, you became my family. Not because of blood or obligation, but because of love. Real love, the kind that chooses to stay even when it would be easier to leave. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. She tried desperately to blink away. But we're so much trouble. Hannah cries all the time, and I'm difficult, and Papa's sad, and this house is full of ghosts. This house is full of life. Eleanor interrupted gently. Your mother's memory isn't a ghost, Lucy. It's a gift. She loved you so much that her love is still here in every photograph, in every story, in the way your father looks at you both. She took Lucy's hands in hers. I'm not trying to replace her. I could never do that. But I can add my love to hers. I can help carry the weight of everything she left behind. Do you really love us? Lucy whispered. Like we were your own. I love you exactly like you're my own, because in every way that matters, you are. Lucy broke then, throwing herself into Eleanor's arms and sobbing against her shoulder. Eleanor held her tight, stroking her dark hair, letting her cry out years of accumulated grief and fear and loneliness. I'm sorry. Lucy choked out between sobs. I'm sorry I was so mean to you when you first came. I was scared. I didn't want to love you because everyone I love leaves. I know, sweetheart, I know. But I'm not leaving. Not ever. Promise. Eleanor pulled back just enough to look into Lucy's red-rimmed eyes. I promise. With everything I am, I promise. Hannah, who had been watching from across the room with wide eyes, suddenly launched herself at them, wrapping her small arms around both Eleanor and Lucy. I want to hug too, she announced. I love hugging. And just like that, the tears turned to laughter. That evening after the girls were asleep, Caleb found Eleanor on the back porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. They're in bed, he asked, coming to stand beside her. Out like lights. Lucy cried herself to exhaustion. I heard. His voice was soft. I heard what you told her. About family. About love. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. I hope that was all right. I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't overstep. Caleb turned her to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. You said exactly what she needed to hear. What I've been failing to tell her for 7 years. You haven't failed her, Caleb. I have. In 100 different ways. His jaw tightened with old guilt. I was so lost in my own grief that I forgot they were grieving too. I tried to be strong for them by not showing emotion, but all I did was make them think they had to hide their feelings. You did your best. My best wasn't good enough. He met her eyes steadily. But you showed me something, Ellie. You showed me that strength isn't about hiding your pain. It's about being honest enough to share it, brave enough to let people in. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. I just did what felt right. And that's exactly why I love you. Caleb's hands moved to cup her face, his thumbs gentle against her cheeks. You don't try to be something you're not. You just are in all your broken, beautiful, stubborn glory. Stubborn. Eleanor managed a watery laugh. Is that supposed to be a compliment? The highest compliment I can give. His expression grew serious. Marry me, Ellie. Her breath stopped. What? Marry me. He said it again, stronger this time. Not because you need shelter or security. Not because my daughters need a mother. Marry me because you love me, and I love you. And I don't want to spend another day pretending that's not enough. Caleb, Eleanor's mind raced. It was too soon, too fast. She'd only been at Willow Creek for 3 months. People would talk. There were proper ways to do these things, proper timelines to follow. But then she thought about everything they'd been through. The gates where she'd begged for work. The night backwoodsmen came with torches. The courtroom where she'd bared her soul to strangers. Nothing about their story had been proper or conventional or safe, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Huh. Caleb's face transformed. She'd never seen him smile like that, open and unguarded, years of grief falling away like ice melting in spring. He kissed her, then soft and sweet and full of promise, under a sky blazing with stars. The news of their engagement spread through Silver Falls like wildfire. Most people were delighted, showering Eleanor with congratulations and offers to help with wedding preparations. A few disapproved, muttering about propriety and appropriate mourning periods, but their voices were drowned out by the overwhelming support. Mrs. Holloway took charge of the planning with military precision, declaring that the wedding would take place on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after Eleanor had first arrived at Willow Creek. "It's fitting," she said firmly, when Eleanor protested about the short timeline. "You came here on Christmas Eve begging for work. You'll become mistress of this house on Christmas Eve as a bride. That's poetry, and I won't hear arguments against it." The girls were ecstatic. "Can I be a flower girl?" Hannah begged. "Please, please, please." "You'll both be part of the ceremony," Eleanor assured her. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Lucy, typically reserved, surprised everyone by throwing herself into wedding preparations with enthusiasm. She helped Eleanor choose fabric for her dress, debated flower arrangements with Mrs. Holloway, and practiced walking down an imaginary aisle in the parlor until she had it perfect. "You're really going to be our mama," she said one evening, the word still strange and wonderful on her tongue. "Our real mama." "Your other mama was real too," Eleanor reminded her gently. "I'm just going to be another one. Some people are lucky enough to have two." Lucy considered this. "I think Mama would have liked you." "You think so?" "I know so." Lucy's gray eyes, so like her father's, were soft with certainty. "She would have wanted Papa to be happy again. And you make him happy. I can see it every time he looks at you." Eleanor pulled her close, blinking back tears. "Thank you, Lucy. That means more than you know." Christmas Eve arrived, wrapped in fresh snow. Willow Creek Ranch had been transformed, every window glowing with candles. Evergreen boughs draped over doorways, the scent of Mrs. Holloway's famous spiced cider filling every room. The parlor served as the chapel, a Christmas tree in the corner, serving as backdrop, its branches laden with handmade ornaments and strings of cranberries. Reverend Thomas Ashford stood before it, his Bible open, his face kind. The guests had gathered ranch hands in their Sunday-best townsfolk who'd come to witness the happy ending everyone needed after so much darkness. Sarah Jenkins sat in the front row, her brother beside her, both of them glowing with the satisfaction of having brought down a tyrant. Caleb waited at the altar in a dark suit, his hair combed, his boots polished, his face a mixture of nervous anticipation and pure joy. And then the music began. Hannah came first, scattering rose petals with the serious concentration of someone performing the most important task in the world. Lucy followed, her dark hair braided with ribbons, carrying a small bouquet of winter jasmine. Then Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Her dress was simple cream-colored wool, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was swept up and pinned with white flowers. She wore no jewelry except a silver cross that had belonged to her grandmother. But it wasn't the dress or the hair that made everyone catch their breath. It was the look on her face. The joy, the peace, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She walked down the aisle alone, as she'd walked so much of her life. But this time, she wasn't walking toward uncertainty or fear. She was walking toward home. Caleb took her hands when she reached him, his grip warm and steady. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're not so bad yourself." Reverend Ashford cleared his throat, smiling at their exchange. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here on this blessed Christmas Eve to witness the union of Caleb Weston and Eleanor Sutton in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple and sincere. They spoke vows they'd written themselves, words that came from the heart rather than tradition. "Ellie," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion, "you came to my gates with nothing and gave me everything. You brought light back to a house that had forgotten what sunshine felt like. You taught my daughters how to trust again, and taught me that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you for all the days we have left. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Eleanor's tears flowed freely now. "Caleb, I spent 8 months wandering looking for a place to belong. I thought I'd lost everything worth having. But then I found you and Lucy and Hannah, and I discovered that home isn't a place. It's people. It's the ones who stay when staying is hard, who fight when fighting seems hopeless, who love even when love is terrifying. I promise to be that person for you. Today, tomorrow, and every day after." The rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that fit perfectly. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Ashford announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride." Caleb pulled her close and kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise, while the room erupted in applause. When they finally broke apart, Hannah tugged at Eleanor's dress. "Does this mean I can call you Mama now?" Eleanor knelt down, her wedding dress pooling around her. "You can call me whatever feels right to you, sweetheart." "Mama," Hannah said firmly. "That's what feels right." She threw her arms around Eleanor's neck, and a moment later, Lucy joined them. And then Caleb wrapped his arms around all three, and they stood there in the candlelight, 4 broken people who had somehow become whole together. The celebration that followed was everything a wedding should be. There was food and music and laughter, toasts and tears and dancing. Caleb proved surprisingly graceful on the dance floor, spinning Eleanor around until she was dizzy with joy. "You never told me you could dance," she accused breathlessly. "You never asked." He grinned, and she realized she'd never seen him grin before. Not really. "Catherine taught me. She said every man should know how to dance with his wife." She was right. She usually was. His expression softened. "I think she'd be happy for us. For me finding someone to love again, for the girls having a mother who adores them." "I hope so." "I know so." He pulled her closer, speaking against her hair. "Love doesn't run out, Ellie. That's what I've learned. Loving you doesn't mean I love her less. It just means my heart grew bigger." Eleanor buried her face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by emotion. "I love you, Caleb Weston." "I love you too, Eleanor Weston." Eleanor Weston. Her new name. Her new life. She'd earned both of them. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the girls were asleep, Caleb led Eleanor up the stairs to the master bedroom, the room that had been his alone for 7 years. "I had Mrs. Holloway prepare it," he said, suddenly nervous. "New curtains, fresh linens. I wanted it to feel like ours, not just mine." Eleanor looked around the room, noting the changes. The dark, heavy drapes had been replaced with lighter fabric. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. But the photographs of Catherine still lined one wall, watching over the space she'd once called home. "You kept the pictures," Eleanor said softly. "Of course. She's part of this family. She always will be." Eleanor crossed to the wall, studying the images of the woman who'd come before her. Catherine had been beautiful, dark-haired, and laughing, her eyes full of life. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered to the photographs, "for loving them first, for making them who they are. I'll take care of them, I promise." Caleb came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "She would have loved you, you know." "That's what Lucy said. Lucy's a smart girl." They stood together in comfortable silence, honoring the past while embracing the future. The months that followed were the happiest Eleanor had ever known. Spring came early to Montana that year, melting the snow and painting the mountains in shades of green. Eleanor threw herself into life at Willow Creek with renewed energy, helping Caleb with the ranch accounts, tending the garden she'd begun restoring, teaching the girls everything she knew. Mrs. Hartford's offer to teach at the local school resurfaced, and this time Eleanor accepted. 3 mornings a week, she rode into Silver Falls to work with the town's children, discovering a gift for education she'd never known she possessed. "You're a natural," Mrs. Hartford told her one afternoon. "The children adore you." "I adore them," Eleanor replied honestly. "Every single one." At home, the transformation continued. Lucy's walls came down completely, revealing a warm, passionate girl who laughed easily and loved fiercely. Hannah flourished under the steady affection she'd been starving for her nightmares, fading, her confidence growing. And Caleb. Caleb became a different man. Not different in essence, but different in expression. He smiled more, laughed more, joined them for meals instead of hiding in his study. He learned to talk about Catherine without his voice going flat, to share memories of the past without drowning in grief. "You fixed us," he told Eleanor one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "This family was broken, and you fixed us." "I didn't fix anything," Eleanor corrected. "I just loved you. The rest happened on its own." "That's what fixing is," he said quietly. "Love in action." On the anniversary of Eleanor's arrival at Willow Creek, the family gathered in the parlor for a special dinner. Mrs. Holloway had prepared all of Eleanor's favorites, and the girls had made decorations and cards. "1 year ago today," Caleb said, raising his glass. "A woman arrived at our gates in rags begging for work. I almost turned her away. It would have been the biggest mistake of my life." "To Mama," Lucy added, lifting her own glass of cider. "For staying when everyone expected her to leave." "To Mama," Hannah echoed. "For being the best hugger in the whole world." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "To all of you. For giving me a home when I had nothing. For taking a chance on a stranger. For loving me, even when I didn't know how to let myself be loved." They drank together, 4 people bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Choice. Commitment. Love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbreakable. After dinner, Eleanor stepped outside to breathe in the cool night air. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars she'd wished on a year ago, desperate and dying. She thought about the woman she'd been then. Broken, hopeless, ready to give up. She thought about the woman she was now. Whole. Happy. Home. The journey between those 2 women had been the hardest thing she'd ever done. Harder than losing Samuel. Harder than losing Thomas. Harder than walking 100 miles with nothing but grief for company. But it had also been the most worthwhile. She heard footsteps behind her and felt Caleb's arms slip around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. The past year. The years to come." "Any regrets?" Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "Not a single one." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I asked you a question the day you arrived. Do you remember? You asked if I could be the mother your girls needed." I had no idea what I was really asking. His voice was thick with emotion. "I thought I was hiring help. I didn't know I was finding salvation." "Neither did I." Eleanor reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that had softened over the past year. "I came here looking for work. I found a family. I came here ready to die. I found a reason to live. And now," she smiled up at him, her heart so full it ached. "Now I have everything I never knew I needed. A husband who loves me. Daughters who call me Mama. A home that's truly mine." "It is yours," Caleb confirmed. "Every board, every beam, every blade of grass. It's as much yours as it is mine." "It's ours," Eleanor corrected. "All of it. The good parts and the hard parts. The memories and the hopes. The ghosts we carry and the dreams we're building." "Ours," he agreed. "Forever." They stood together under the stars, 2 wounded souls who had found healing in each other's arms. Behind them, the white house with green shutters glowed with warmth and light. Inside, 2 little girls were getting ready for bed, their laughter drifting through the open windows. This was home. Not because of the building or the land or the name on the deed. Home because of the people who lived there. The love that filled every room. The choice they made every single day to stay, to fight, to belong to each other. Eleanor Sutton had arrived at Willow Creek Ranch with nothing but rags and desperation. Eleanor Weston would spend the rest of her life there surrounded by everything that mattered. The woman who had begged for work at Iron Gates had found something far more precious than employment. She had found her place in the world. She had found her family. She had found herself. And that was the greatest gift of all. The gates of Willow Creek Ranch stood open now, welcoming instead of forbidding, a symbol of the transformation that had taken place within. The beggar had become a wife, a mother, a teacher, a beloved member of a community that had once viewed her with suspicion. The broken man had learned to smile again, to love again, to hope again. The grieving children had found a new source of comfort without losing their connection to the mother who died giving them life. And the house that had been haunted by grief was now filled with laughter, with love, with the everyday chaos of a family living fully and completely. This was their story. Not a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but something better. A real story with real pain and real healing, real loss and real redemption. A story about second chances and chosen families and the courage it takes to let yourself love again after you've lost everything. A story about coming home. Eleanor stood at those gates one last time, looking back at the road that had brought her here. She thought about the woman who had walked that road a year ago, frozen and starving and ready to give up. She thought about everything that woman had survived to reach this moment. And she was grateful. For all of it. Even the pain. Because the pain had led her here. To Caleb. To Lucy and Hannah. To the life she was meant to live. She turned away from the gates and walked back toward the house, toward the family waiting for her inside. The snow was falling softly now, blanketing Willow Creek in white, covering the old year, and making way for the new. Eleanor Weston walked through it without fear. She was finally completely, irrevocably home.